Buces, buces.
Coba. Assalamualaikum coba.
Assalamualaikum. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to today's creative writing workshop, themed The Well and the Soil Exploring Bavaism. I am Gabriela Romy Guterres. It's an honor for me to guide you through today's event. We are delighted to have participants from various places joining us virtually for this insightful workshop. Today, we are privileged to have Dr. Abdul Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Associate Professor of English at Jamal Muhammad College, India, as our keynote speaker. Dr. Jinnah will take us on a literary journey exploring Bavaism, a theme that delves deep into the cultural and creative dimension of storytelling. Now, before we proceed, I would like to kindly ask all of you to join us in listening to the Indonesian national anthem, Indonesia Raya. To the cultural and creative dimension of storytelling. Now, before we proceed, I would like to kindly ask all of you to join us in listening to the Indonesian national anthem, Indonesia Raya. To the cultural and creative dimension of storytelling. Now, before we proceed, I would like to kindly ask all of you to join us in listening to the Indonesian national anthem, Indonesia Raya. To the cultural and creative dimension of storytelling. Now, before we proceed, I would like to kindly ask all of you to join us in listening to the Next, we will listen to Unas Mars, the anthem of Universitas Negeri Semarang. Next, we will listen to Unas Mars, the anthem of Universitas Negeri Semarang. Moving on, I would like to invite Dr. Rahayu Puji Haryanti MHum to deliver the opening speech. Dr. Rahayu is the coordinator of English Literature Study Programs, Faculty of Languages and Arts of Universitas Negeri Semarang. Please welcome Dr. Rahayu. The time is yours.
Well, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished lecturers, esteemed guests, and dear students. It is a great honor for me to welcome you all to today's second part of our creative writing workshop. As last week we had Dr. Laksmi Priya with her inspiring ideas on how to write poems relating to our roots, our culture. Now today we are going to have the continuation of it to the theme, the wells and the soils, exploring Bavaism. This workshop marks an exciting opportunity for us to delve into the rich layers of regionalism, spirituality, and creative writing. And I'm especially pleased to see such a diverse gathering of participants from our very own English literature program of University Universitas Negeri Semarang to our esteemed colleagues and students from various universities across Indonesia. We are truly fortunate today to have Dr. Abdul Muhammad Ali Jinnah, with whom we have already been familiar. Associate Professor of English from Jamal Muhammad College, India, as our guest speaker. Dr. Jinnah is specialized in literature and postcolonial studies, who, besides teaching, conducting research, and publishing academic books and articles, also writes creative works and thus will surely illuminate new pathways for us, writers and thinkers. This workshop is designed not only to enrich our understanding of creative writing, but also to motivate us to produce works that draw from our own unique culture context. In a world where globalization often blurs the lines of individual identity, it is more important than ever to celebrate and preserve our indigenous voices, to explore the wells and of our traditions, and to nurture the soils of our heritage. I hope that through today's discussions and activities, we will be inspired to bring forth new creative works that reflect our own sense of place, history, and cultural identity. Writing is a powerful tool for expressing indigeneity, and I'm confident that this workshop will spark fresh ideas and motivate all of us to continue exploring our creative potential. Thank you to Dr. Jinnah for sharing his time and expertise with us today. And thank you to all of you, the participants who have helped this event come through, and especially to our students, our future writers, for passion and dedication to the craft of writing. With that, it is my great pleasure to officially open this workshop. Once again, we warmly welcome Dr. Abdul Muhammad Ali Jinnah as we embark on this journey of creative exploration. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rahayu Puji Haryanti MHum, for your insightful and encouraging opening speech. Your words have set a wonderful tone for today's workshop, and we truly appreciate your support in making this event possible. We look forward to a fruitful and inspiring session ahead. Now, without further ado, let's dive into the main session of today's workshop. It's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed speaker, Dr. Abdul Muhammad Ali Jinnah. He is an associate professor of English at Jamal Muhammad College, India, and has extensive experience in creative writing and cultural studies. He specialized in literary theory, pop culture studies, and Persian literature. He has received an excellent award in 2018 in recognition of the consistent superior performance in English studies by International Multidisciplinary Research Foundation. His published book, in academic, like soft skills development for undergraduate degree program, and fictional works like Taliaura, published in 2020, the Quadrant series, published in 2020, White Eyes and the White Shroud, an anthology of horror poems, published in 2020, Gunpowder, published in July 2020, Rasfeber, in collaboration with UNESCO, published in 2021, Komorebi, also in collaboration with UNESCO, published in 2021, and Sonder, published in 2021. His presentation will explore the fascinating world of Bavaism and its implications in the world of literature. Dr. Jena, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, all of you.
Walaikum
It's
salam.
good to be back in Indonesia. Of course, I came to Indonesia, I guess, in the year 2019. It was a 10-day Worldville program where, of course, Dr. Rahayu and the administration of UNESCO were so kind to invite us. We came as a couple along with a few of our students also. And let me confess that that was one of the best times of my life. I enjoyed Indonesia. I enjoyed your cuisine. I enjoyed your hospitality. And I think in many ways, coming to Indonesia was a kind of a turning point in my life. Because before coming to Indonesia, I was just an academician. I was just a teacher. But it was the interaction with the Indonesian students and the faculty members of Indonesia, especially UNESCO, that it sort of created a spark in me to become a creative writer. So as the person was giving an introduction about me, you must have noticed that she mentioned a few of the books that I had edited and co-edited. I think at least 4 of the books, which form my repertoire, they are all in connection with Indonesia. I think 3 of the books were collaborations with UNESCO, and the other was from, if I'm right, it was from the University of Madura. So, as I said, Indonesia has been a real spark for me. It has made me who I am today. I'm not just a teacher. I'm also a creative writer. I'm also a person who, let's say, educates or maybe shows the way for the future writers, for the future students to become creative writers. Because I think being a student of literature is not just about reading. It's not just about professing literature. It's also about creating. It's also about writing literature. So that is the crossroads at which I believe we are meeting today. The second part of this program, I believe last week it was Dr. Lakshmi Priya who talked to you about poetry. So her focus, her onus was on poetry. And today I would sort of guide you towards the writing of fiction and non-fiction. Now, before we start, I just want to have, I need to share my screen. Can I do that? Because I think it's being disabled.
Oh, yeah. Minute.
Can I do that? No, I'm still getting a disabled.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, I can do it now, I guess. Yes. So yes, this is going to be
Yes.
what we are going to discuss. As I said, the focus is going to be on fiction and non-fiction. Now, let me just make certain practical necessities aware for you people. Number one, see, we are students of literature, so we know that when we talk about the development of literature, it's always been oral literature, and the first literary form to develop has been poetry. So I guess for us, the students of literature, I count myself as a student of literature, not just as a teacher, because I think this is one particular area, it's one particular discipline in which you always remain a student. You keep reading. Right? I'm sure I share this with all of you. All of us are readers first. So in our the chronology of reading, we probably would have started reading poetry first. We would have been made aware that poetry is probably the creme de la creme when it comes to literature. But welcome to the 21st century, and poetry probably is not that important a literary genre as non-fiction is today. I think today it is non-fiction, the writing of what we would categorize as prose, or as something that is a slice of life. I think that is more important today. So if you look at the reading list of the major people in the world, be it politicians, be it statesmen, be it corporate leaders or celebrities, if you look at the top 10 list, you would always find that it is non-fiction that would be the major part, the major chunk of their reading. So as I said, poetry has kind of taken a backseat. Now, this is not just from the literary purview, it's also from a very commercial purview. So what sells today majorly is non-fiction. I want you to have that in your mind very, very clearly. You might be poets, hats off to you. But when it comes to a global exposure, I'm being very practical. When it comes to being coming to a global exposure, poetry might not exactly take you there. Whereas non-fiction would definitely take you there, because I think people read non-fiction more than they read poetry or any other literary genre. So these are the ground rules which I'm trying to establish over here before I enter into the central idea of what we are going to discuss and probably, thrash out between us today. I'm sure this is how it's going to be. This session is going to be a two-pronged session in which the first part, the first phase, I would be sharing my ideas of how literature, especially fiction and non-fiction, has developed, and what are the preoccupations, at least now, if not earlier, at least now, when it comes to the field of fiction and non-fiction. So I am going to focus my discussions with you taking up a very important writer from my own culture and whose name is Bavaism. Okay, you people are not going to be aware of Bavaism, but please Google him out later once the session is over. Once we bid farewell to each other, please do Google him out and find out who Bavaism exactly is. As I said, he is one of the major writers of modern contemporary Tamil literature. Now, I am a Tamilian. I come from India. I come from the southern part of India, which is called Tamil Nadu. Now, Tamil Nadu, if you look at the cartography of India, we have a taper. And at the end of the taper, where the land meets the three seas, we have my own state, my own region that is called Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu is one of the I know I'm very proud to say this, that Tamil Nadu is one of the cultural capitals of my great nation. And if you Google out my language, that is Tamil, Tamil is considered to be the oldest language in the world. Not any other language, mind you, it is Tamil, which is considered to be the oldest language in the world. So I come from that culture. I come from that linguistic richness. So we have had literature, it seems, this is how, our ancient archaeological finds have been telling us, we have been having literature in Tamil for around 8,000 years. So, as I said, this is what our archaeological findings have actually told us. So, ancient Tamil literature starts with some major epics, which were poetic in nature, but over the period of progress, when we come to the 21st century, we have writers, the most important Tamil writers of my language. They are writers who are writers of either fiction or non-fiction. I'm not saying that there are no poets as such. Of course, We have some very important poets, not a case in point in that way. But the major writers, the majority of the writers in Tamil today are the writers of fiction or the writers of prose. If you want me to, club together both fiction and non-fiction together, let me call them as writers of prose. So prose sells, prose is popular, and prose is considered to be the genre of today. I'm taking my culture, my language as a case in point, as a nutshell of how literature is developing all around the world. So starting from here, coming down to Indonesia, I'm sure, and going to the west, whether it is Europe or America, or going down, further down, Australia, it is prose that is the predominant genre of our 21st century. So becoming a prose writer opens up many avenues for you. Now comes the question, what kind of prose writer or what kind of writer should we become? I mean, what should be our focus? Okay, let's say that be it a professional writer or be it an amateur writer, let's say we consider writing as our calling. We want to write. So taking my own, example, in the year 2020, when we were all quarantined at home because of the corona, and I was not teaching, colleges and universities were shut all across the globe. So I wanted to do something. So that was the time I started thinking, okay, why not become a writer? Already I had the experience of being in Indonesia. So Indonesia had kind of, sparked something in me. So that is the time when I started writing. So I found, after, a kind of a research, I found that there were a lot of people, novices like me, freshers like me, who were dabbling in the field of creativity. They were creating fiction or they were creating non-fiction. They're writing about their experiences. So that's how I also started. I started creating short fiction, what we would call flash fiction. Many of those stories were sort of intertwined from my own life experience. So that's how, as I say, I started writing. So this attempt at writing, I should tell you, was a curious culmination of two different things. One is, of course, my own personal experiences. So when I say personal experiences, I'm talking about what in our own, in the arena of writing is called a personality box. So what exactly is your personality box? I need you people to find that out. So what exactly are you? Who are you? So what culture do you belong? What region do you belong? What is the specific landscape of your region? What is the dialect? What is the cultural, heterogeneity of your place? All these things put together form what is called a personality box. So again, let me take myself as an example. Who am I? What is my personality box? Okay, I am an Indian. Okay, but I am also an Indian Muslim. For those of you who do not know, India is a very heterogeneous region, like Indonesia, of course. So we have, if I tell you, 5 major religions, Hinduism being the majority religion, followed by Islam. Then we have Christianity, we have Buddhism, we have Jainism, and then we have Sikhism. So there are at least, 6 religions which are major for us. So I come in that cusp. I'm an Indian. I'm a part of a syncrety of so many religions, but I myself am a Muslim. But I'm not just that. That's not just my identity. I'm also a Tamil Muslim. I belong to a culture, as I said, a linguistic diversity, which is called Tamil. So who am I? I'm an Indian. I'm a Muslim. I'm a Tamil. I come from down south. So all these are, let's say, the starting points of what I would call my personality. So when I say all these things, I'm sure you should be also able to identify what personality boxes you, as a student, as an Indonesian, as a person, you tick. So that is exactly where we come to, as I said, the onus of our discussion today. And I have looked at all these, personality boxes in all its varied varieties put together. I am going to use two different keywords, which take me towards a very major keyword about the writer that I'm going to discuss today, and that is Bavaism. So what are the two keywords? Well, one is well, and the other is the soil. Now, why exactly did I take this up? I will give you this, in a lot of explanatory detail when we come towards the end of our discussion. But I want you to connect with me on this. I just want you to imagine the soil. So, I'm sure Indonesia also has a very rural landscape. So I'm sure all of you would have gone to your fields. Has your feet touched the soil? Because I think that is one thing which a lot of us today do not experience much. City dwellers like me, for example, even if we go to, the countryside, to our villages, we would be wearing our shoes. So we would be going, our feet, the bare skin of our feet does not hit the soil. One aspect which our rustic writers tell us, it's very popular today, is the idea of earthing. It's called earthing, where the urbanites, people who belong to the city, they are made to come over to the villages, remove their shoes, remove their socks, and get down on the soil. Have you done that? Have you done that? It's a very interesting experience. For those of you who are experienced only wearing shoes, or, if you even wear flip-flops, even at home, that has become a fashion today. Your bare skin, the sole of your feet does no longer touch the ground. Okay, I'm just telling it to you from my own experience. Maybe for you, the experiences might be different, but the touch of the soil, that's so essential.
I'm
The
sorry for
core grain.
interrupting, Dr. Abdul.
I'm
Are we
sorry?
still on the first slide?
Yeah. I'll change my slide. Please do not tell me what to do. I'll do it. Okay, I'll change. I'm just giving you an introduction. I'll do that. Okay, just give me that time to build up. I'm just building up my ideas. There are very few slides, so don't worry about consumption of time. See, made me lose my flow. I was just telling you about how much important the soil becomes for our experiences of our own rustic culture. So I just want you students, I just want you participants, I want you friends to imagine the touch of your feet, your soul on the soil. Okay, because that is exactly what this writer I'm going to discuss, that is Bavaism, is going to give us in detail, in intricate detail, the soil. And then, of course, the well. Can you imagine a well? Okay, just imagine a well, right? So why the well? I'll tell you this again, as I said, in the next slides to come. The well is a very important metaphor when it is about Bavaism, the writer. Or, I think even for us, we need to develop a particular metaphor of what we are going to write. Now, when I talk about metaphors, when I talk about the idea of how literature can be developed from the well and the soil, I'm just going to go back and maybe make you look at how this eternal question comes. Okay, we all have studied literature, we read literature, we are all part of literature, we are students of literature, we are readers. I just want you to consider this question: can there be a literature without a landscape? I mean, the geography, the scape, the space, that is so predominant when it comes to literature. So, coming from my own experiences, when I started reading or when I became a student of literature, I found that, in my classrooms, in the teaching sessions, my teachers, they concentrated a lot on a particular movement, a particular ism, which is called Romanticism. I'm sure all of us are aware of Romanticism. We know the great Romantic writers, the canonical Romantic writers. So, whether it's Coleridge or, Wordsworth or Shelley or Byron or Keats or Clare or Walter Scott, all these poets, where when poetry was a big genre, we find that when it is about their own writings, their own creativities, they come up with a ideology that is called an angst. Now, I want us as writers to create a particular brand of angst for ourselves. Okay. So I think a great writer is a person who has an angst to create. Now, what exactly do I mean by angst? Let's imagine you go, as I said, I know that Indonesia is such a beautiful country. It has got some of the best beaches in the world. It has got some of the best landscapes in the world. And as Indonesians, I'm sure you all have been over there. You have seen some of the best beaches in the world. So when you go over there, when you stand on the sand and when you let the water from the ocean, from the sea, in the form of waves, come and lap up your toes. I'm using the feet metaphor a lot because I think the feet is one particular part of the body which experiences nature and landscape more than any other part of the body. I'm right. I'm sure I'm right in that. So when you do that, when you get that chillness of the water that spreads all over your body, what is the emotion? What is the predominant emotion that comes to you? It might be joy. It might be thrill. But if you just experience joy and thrill, I think you are just an ordinary person. Coming to angst. If you experience that emotion, if you experience that thrill, if you experience that joy, and if that joy compels you, propels you, makes you, forces you to create, to write that down. That is angst. I'm sure, for the modern generation, angst might work in so many different ways. So creativity, at least till my generation, creativity was more about, jotting down ideas on paper or maybe on the laptop. You type something and, you put it down on the laptop. For you, people, it might be different. You might take up your smartphones or, you might take up your smart cameras and you probably might shoot that. You might take a selfie. All that works. I'm not saying that's wrong. But what I'm trying to tell you is that does it propel you? I'm using this word propel because it's almost like a compulsion. It's a passion that is formed out of compulsion. No, that is angst. Now, that is how I want you to look at some of the canonical writings also. So, Wordsworth, who personally is not my favorite writer, but looking at Wordsworth, looking at the creativities, looking at the poems that he has created, we understand one thing, and that is he sees something, and that vision, he calls it a vision, and that vision propels him towards creativity. He might have used a lot of fancy words to put that across to us, but the idea is very simple. You see something and you start creating. I think that is how literature starts. That is how literature develops. Of course, this creativity, as I said, can work in so many different fundamental factors. For example, someone like Freud, he might say that you look at something, you daydream about it, and then you create something else. So for a science fiction writer, it might be looking at something and then creating something that is, fundamentally and in binary opposition to what you have seen. I'll come to that in the very next slide. So friends, I want you to understand one basic essential thing. What you see, what you experience, what is around you, that goes into, it's the fuel for your creativity. So that is what I think the romantic writers were so successful in doing, is that the angst of seeing and the angst of presenting, the confluence of both these things are what you find in their poetry. Now, I'm just taking up three different examples. I'm just making you look at three different images. And these are three different images which are from three different writers, romantic writers. So on one, I think the larger image you have a small stream. Can you see that? Yes. Has the slide changed? Can you see that? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have three different images. I just want you to have a look at these images. And if you have read romantic poetry, can you tell me what poems this might be about? Oh, I know I'm creating a little bit of a complication for you, but just think about it. For example, it's a very important stream in England. It's in the Cockermouth region. It's called the Stride. It looks so peaceful, right? Have you seen that? Can you see that? It looks so peaceful, right? Can you see those two stones over there? Do you think you can stand on one particular part of the stone? Can you see those two stones near each other? So maybe, do you think, I'm sure most of you are youngsters, do you think you can stand on one bank, on one of the stones out there and just leap and reach the other stone? You can just cross the stream over there, right? Yes or no? It's very easy, right? But let me tell you, this is one of the most dangerous streams in England. Because what you see out there is a very narrow stream, right? It's actually very, very deep. And the stones which you see out there, they're very slippery. So a lot of people who thought that they could just cross over have lost their lives and their bodies have not been found. Google it out. It's a very interesting stream. I love the stream. Why? I'll tell you why. Because one particular poet, he goes on a walk, he stands on one end of the stream, on one of those boulders out there. I think that's what makes literature so eternal. 300 years ago, a great poet stood on one of those stones and he looked across and he thought that he could just jump and cross. But some villager came and held him back and he said, no, don't cross. It looks very calm. It looks very peaceful, but it's not that peaceful. It's a very dangerous thing. It's very slippery. So don't do it. So you and I probably would have just looked at it and we would have thought, wow, nature is so bountiful. Nature is so mysterious. Nature is so beautiful. And we probably would have walked away, probably taken a photo or something, maybe a selfie with it or something. And we would have walked away. You know what this fellow did? What this person did? He looked at it. He was so amazed by it. He was so mystified by it that he created a poem that today is considered to be one of the greatest of the romantic poems. It is called Kubla Khan. Have you read it? Kubla Khan by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So in Kubla Khan, Coleridge presents a picture of a great, vast castle. Fine. What has that got to do with this? Because in that castle, in that scape, in that context which Coleridge portrays, you have a very beautiful river. It's called the primeval river, the river of Alf. So Alf moves across and it's a very mighty river. It's not like the usual streams which flow from up to down. It's actually a mighty stream that flows from down to up. It takes that upward position. Now that is magical. That is very fantastic. But that idea of impossibility, Coleridge gets from this particular river. Now that is what makes, as I said, literature beautiful. You and I would probably just marvel, but what Coleridge does is that he creates. You understand how landscape can give you the idea, the essence of creativity, which can make it impossible and which can make it timeless. So there is another image out there. You have the moon, or rather, yeah, it's the moon. And then there is a mountain. And then there is a vast expanse of waterscape. It's a river. And then you have a boat. So all these images put together are part of a very small poem written by William Wordsworth. The name of the poem is The Stolen Boat. In case you have not read The Stolen Boat, please read it. It's a fantastic poem. It's a part of his larger autobiography called The Excursion. So it's a small poem, which is a part of his larger epic. It's called The Excursion. So, what Wordsworth does as a small boy, as a child, He steals a boat and then he goes on the river. He tries to, cross the river. And when he's doing that, suddenly it becomes night. So the sun goes down and the moon comes and a darkness spreads. And I'm sure many of us would have experienced this. When it is dark, nature can become very terrifying. So the same nature, which in the morning, when there is sun, which appears so beautiful, when the sun goes down and when darkness spreads, what happens is it becomes very frightening. It's the same nature. But nature, even in our own, Indian spirituality, we always say that nature has got two different forms. One we call the peaceful form, the beautiful form, and the other, which is called the terrifying form. I'm sure many of you Indonesians would be also able to connect with what I'm trying to tell you, because Indonesia, as I said, has some of the most beautiful places when it comes to nature. But in your country, nature can also be very terrifying because you have been rocked by earthquakes, you have been rocked by tsunamis, you have volcanic eruptions. So I think that is an essential part of your geography and in many ways your lifestyle also. So nature, which is beautiful, Shantata, as we call it, and nature, which is terrifying, Bhayanaka. These are the two terms that we always use to express nature in all its glory. So that is the point which I think Wordsworth is also trying to drive down here, that nature, which is so beautiful, it comes from his own experiences. And we know, of course, that, the British countryside is very beautiful. Today, you can Google it out. But people like us, who are digital immigrants, who were born before Google, how would we have understood the beauty of a country? For me as a young chap, how would I have understood the beauty of a country? It's only through literature. So that is the way creativity sort of, transcends from one culture to the other. So, that should be a good starting point for all of us. How are we going to translate our landscape to a different era or to a different arena, to a different region, to someone who is alien to us, to someone who has absolutely no experience, no idea of how my culture, let me not use the word my, of how our culture, of how our landscapes, of how our cartography works. So I think that is why literature is so much defined by the landscape. So let's take up, I think, American literature. I think you focus more on American literature. So how do these writers, they translate the American landscape to us? How do we understand the American landscape? Not through Google. I'm not asking you through Google. I'm asking you through creativity in the form of literature. So, someone like, the quintessential American survivalist, like Thoreau, how does he present the wild landscape of America? How does Whitman present his own contemporary image of America? How does a poet like Robert Frost tell you about the forests and the orchards of America? Or coming down to, the 1920s, the time of the Harlem Renaissance, how does someone like Gwendolyn Brooks present the Harlem, the urban landscape of America? How does she do that? How do these writers do that? So if that is America, coming down to Canada, when someone like Margaret Atwood, when she talks about Canada, the idea of Canadian landscapes, or the idea of Canadian literature, she talks about the emptiness of Canada. Even today, Canada is considered to be a very empty region. I think something very similar to one of your neighboring continents, that is Australia. If you've read some of the poems or, the literature of Australia, they tell you that, Australia is inhabited only in the fringes, whereas the middle part of Australia, that's empty. We still call it the bush, the great wilderness. So that is something which you find similar in Canada also, something which you find similar in, Australia, something very similar which you find in Africa. So some of the great African writers, like Wilbur Smith, the great South African novelist, He talks to you about the African jungles, the African wild. They call it the bush. So how does the African bush work? How different is it from, let's look at it as the urban scape of Africa. It's fascinating. That writer is able to do that because what he, Wilbur Smith, as a person does is that he embraces his landscape. And that embracing, he brings it out in his writing. So my own experiences as an Indian, when I talk about Indian literature, it's so vast. It's befuddling because for me, someone who is down south, we have never experienced the snow. Have you? I'm sure even Indonesians do not have snow, right? We do not have snowfall. For us, it's a, let's say, a 6-hour journey by flight. We just move from the south of India to the north of India. We go to the extreme north of India, you will have eternal snowfall. But for people like me who are born in the hot sun, who survive in a hot climate, that is something very, very different. And everyone, see, India is a developing country. Everyone cannot experience or, does not have enough money, does not have the economic resources to, catch a flight and go over to something that is just over there, a part of our geographical territory. So how do we know all that? We know all that through our writings. So when, a Himalayan writer, like we have a novelist called Ruskin Bond, who's an Englishman who has settled in the Himalayas. We have a lot of, these people who migrate and settle over there. And they talk to us about the beauty of, the snowfall which they experience. Coming to me, it was my lifetime ambition. I wanted to go, and which I achieved, a couple of years back. I went, I saw I took the snow in my hand. And that is such a beautiful experience. Now, what I can do is that I can share this experience to you through my writings. That is what, friends, I want you to do. Share your experiences, share your life to us through your writings. So, India, as I was saying, we have, on one hand, we have snow, like snow 24/7, all over the year, all around the clock. And then you travel some 300 kilometers, you come a little bit to the west, you have a desert where even there is no water. There is absolutely no rainfall. So from one terrain to the other, and then you come down south, you have a very different terrain. So you understand the transgression, or let me not use that word. Let me use a word like transmission. Let me be very positive. Something like a transmission of landscape is easy because you have experienced it. It's yours. So, start that way. Write about you. Write about, your surrounding. Write about your experiences. So that, I think, is the most essential part of being a writer, because a writer, this is my firm belief, is a cartographer. What a writer does, essentially, is that the writer creates a narrative that in many ways is bounded, limited by the cartographic experiences of the writer's personality. So that's why I say the writer is a cartographer. Now, the writer has been defined in so many different cultures and so many different ways. For example, since we are also into post-colonial studies, ours being, regions which share post-colonial, preoccupations. When I first read African literature, it was by a writer called Chinua Achebe, who is one of the most prominent African writers. So he's a novelist, but Achebe is also a teacher. He's also an academician. He teaches. So he says, a novelist from Africa, from a country like, let's say, Nigeria, to which he belongs, that writer is not simply a writer who creates stories. The writer creates history. And through the creation of history, what the writer does is that he or she presents how do I say it? It's a composition of the shared experiences of history. I want you to be with me on this. We as writers should create something that should be a shared experience. That's why I say a writer should be a cartographer. I think that is the central tenet of being a writer. So many people might say so many different ways, but every writer, I think, has the geography, the cartography, which he or she creates or he or she experiences, which become part of their, of their repository of writing. There is one particular American writer I like. He's a creator of horror stories. My specialization is Gothic and horror. So there is one particular American writer I love, and his name is Stephen King. I've been reading Stephen King right from my childhood. He's a very voluminous writer. He has written something around 60, collections of novels, short stories, prose, everything. Every year he comes up at least with one particular work. Though he's touching 80s, I believe now, he still, writes a lot. What I love about Stephen King is that he is a writer of horror. He creates horror. Fine. I love horror. So, he creates everything. Werewolves, zombies, ghosts, apparitions, haunted, hotels, everything. Even haunted cellular phones. He has this gist for horror. Fine. But more than that, what he does is that he also creates the landscape of his childhood. Now, he comes from an American state that is called Maine. We know that there are 50 American states. One of the lesser known states is Maine. Maine is known for its oceanscape. Maine is known for its lobsters, seafood. But before Stephen King started writing and started presenting Maine in his own writings, Maine was not much known to the world. Now, we might tell, what do we know about America? What sort of, we know New York, we know California, we know Los Angeles, we know San Francisco. These are the states which we primarily, Detroit, Chicago, or maybe Texas. But there are so many smaller states. And one of those smaller states is Maine. It's a very beautiful state. And what Stephen King does is that he becomes the writer of Maine. Maine. Google it. It's a very beautiful state. Now, I think that is what elevates the writing of Stephen King. It's not just the horror. It's not the characters. It's not just the thematic preoccupations. It's also the location. When it comes about creativity, location is a very, very important part. Think of all the great writers. Think of what locations they have created. In, Tamil Nadu, again, we have a writer whose name is R.K. Narayan. He transcends two different states. So when he started writing, what he did was that he wanted to create a unique landscape for his own. So he takes the landscape of Tamil Nadu. There's a neighboring state here that is called Karnataka. So he takes the landscape of Karnataka, he takes the landscape of Tamil Nadu, he mixes them together, and he creates something that is very new. He creates a new setting, which is neither Tamil Nadu nor Karnataka, but it's an amalgamation of both Tamil Nadu and Karnataka put together. But it's illusionary, it's fantasy, it's false, it's fictional. All that is fine. But please understand, even fiction comes only through experience. So it was his experience of the landscape of one particular state and the experience of the landscape of another particular state, mixing together, amalgamating together, creating a new landscape. But ultimately, it comes only through experience. So that's why I say, become cartographers. Don't just think of writing stories. Think of creating stories from your own cartography, from your own geographical locations. So what you do when you do that is that you create a narrative that is entrenched in your soil, that is entrenched in your geography. So tomorrow, when you become writers and when your stories come to a person here, let's say a person in like me, who's settled, who's based in Tamil Nadu, in India, and when I read your stories, what I should do is that I should be able to experience the soil, the smell, the touch, synesthesia, right? All the five senses which belong to your culture, which belong to which belong to your landscape. Please think of creating, stories, narratives, expressions in that way. So that's how we come to know countries. So before I came to Indonesia, I spent, lovely 10 days in Indonesia. Before I came to Indonesia, what I did is that, I read something about Indonesia. So I came with a preconceived notion that this is how your food is going to be. This is how, your nature is going to be. This is how you people are going to be. So that sort of gave me a precursor to what your culture would be. That comes through writing, that comes through creativity. Do that. That is the point that I'm trying to make here. Do that. So when I was a child, I always wanted to go to Scotland, because when I was a child, I always thought that, Scotland is the most beautiful country in the world. As I said, I belong to the pre-Google, I belong to the pre-internet generation. So if I had thought as a child that Scotland is the most beautiful country in the world, how did I come up with that idea? Through literature. It was like, poets like Robert Burns, or, writers like Dr. Johnson, who though settled in Britain, in England, he was writing about his own hometown of Scotland, where he went on a walking tour. So even Wordsworth, when he writes The Solitary Reaper, he creates a girl who belongs to the Highland, which is Scotland. So you understand how Scotland, the geography of Scotland, that is presented to us through literature. It reaches a young mind. When I was young, I mean, when I was a kid, let's say 10, 12 years old. When it reached to me, I found beauty in that landscape. That is the hallmark of a writer. When you not just create stories, you create the essence of your landscape. Now, friends, as I've kept saying, I keep emphasizing this, that Indonesia is one of the most beautiful countries, if not the most beautiful. It's definitely one of the most beautiful countries. You belong to such a beautiful country. So how should I see Indonesia? I can see Indonesia only in the way you present your country to me. So, you know what? If you have not started writing, if you're in the process of thinking about becoming a writer, you want to take that leap. It's a magnificent leap of faith. Being a writer is not simple. It's tough. You know why? Because taking that leap, putting down your first word on paper, that's tough. Till you do that, you will never know that you're a writer. But do that. The story would create itself. Put down, work hard, put down your shared experiences. And when you do that, what would come out is magic. Trust me on this. You can create magic, but the magic should come from, as I keep saying, shared experiences. Share your experiences with us. When you do that, that would create something that is history. So that is where I'm coming to now. So that is how this person has become very popular. His name is Bavaism. I guess a couple of decades back, Bavaism was an ordinary person in the sense he was working in the electricity field, the office that is in charge of, giving electricity to homes. He works in that sector. Let's say an ordinary person, but an extraordinary visionary in the sense that he would always be interested in literature. He would read literature. He would look around the landscape of his region. And slowly that region, it became imbibed in himself. And from that, what he does is that he started creating stories, which are not stories, they are actualities. I think that is the beauty of someone like Bavaism. He tells you stories, but these are not stories. These are, personal experiences. These are personal anecdotes of what he saw, who he met, what happens in his region. Now, his region is a very historically significant region of Tamil Nadu. Its old name is called Tondai Mandalam. And the new name is called Tiruvannamalai. It's a very small, I wouldn't call it a city, nor would I call it a village. It's a combination of both those things put together. You have a centralized capital of that place, district, which is called Tiruvannamalai, which is a semi-urban village. Okay, so what we call technically a town, not a city, not a village, it's a town. And then surrounding, we have so many small villages which are 100% rustic, right? So when I use that word rustic, I'm sure you would be going back to your, experiences of Indonesian villages. Did those villages come to the forefront? Those beautiful paddy fields, or whatever you grow, long stretches of green. Here and there you have water for irrigation. Then you have that, the horizon where the sun sets, or probably, there's a mountain on the horizon, or maybe there's a beach on the horizon. Does it come to you? It has to come to you, because that is exactly what Bava Chellodurai does when it is about creating his own landscape, which is Tondai Mandalam. Now, if Tamil Nadu, it's on the north, Tondai Mandalam is on the north, okay, of Tamil Nadu. Then you have a huge region on top of it. It's one of the backward regions of Tamil Nadu. What is its uniqueness? Now, Tondai Mandalam, as we call it, or Tiruvannamalai, as we call it, there are three major things in Tondai Mandalam. One is its temple. It's one of the most beautiful temples in all of India, maybe all of the world. So, we have a shared experience, Indonesia, and because you have a history of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, a lot of our Hindu gods also. Many of you are named, you still have those names. You still use those names, which are Sanskritized names, which have come from India. So there is this god, one of our major gods, whose name is Shiva. So we have a trinity, Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. Brahma is called the creator. Shiva is called the destroyer. And the one who maintains that balance is Vishnu. So these are our major gods in Hinduism or in India. And one of the major gods is Shiva. So Shiva has his own major temples. So there are 5 major temples of Shiva spread across, India and Nepal. So one of the major temples is called Chidambara. So Chidambara temple is based in Tondai Mandalam. So that is the first major thing when it comes to Tiruvannamalai. And then there is a mountain. That's one significant mountain in Tiruvannamalai. Okay, so that is another thing. And then, as I said, the surrounding area is all about soil. So these are the 3 major elements of Tondai Mandalam. And then when you put all these things together, you have the lifestyle that is gradually evolved out of it, right? So one of the essences of lifestyle, let's say, is its cuisine. So which is, a curious assortment of so many things put together. I'm sorry, there is a mistake in this. It's assortment of so many things put together. This is the temple. I'm sorry, this is the mountain. So it's like, like you have these volcanoes, right? So we have this significant mountain in Tiruvannamalai. So when you enter Tiruvannamalai, you cannot help noticing this mountain. This mountain is synonymous with Tiruvannamalai. Okay, so this is the mountain. Maybe it might be very insignificant for you people. But for the people of Tondai Mandalam, this is very, very significant, because this is sort of something that defines that region. So this is the mountain. This is the Tiruvannamalai mountain. And this is the famous temple that I've told you about. So many of you have the experiences of temples. So we have Borobudur, which you probably must have visited, you must have seen. That's part of your culture. So this is an essential part of our culture, Tamil Nadu culture. This is a very famous temple. It's called the Tiruvannamalai Shivan temple. It's a temple for Shiva. So you might see all those projections, right? Those huge monuments. Those are called the gopuras, the tall erected structures. So that is one tier. Then there is another tier, and then in the center we have the temple. So this is how the geographical cartography of a temple in Tamil Nadu it was. This is not a temple which you will find in North India. This is a temple which you will find only in South India. Okay, in our region. Okay, so this is the temple, and this is the soil. Okay, so these are the three things: the mountain, the temple, and the soil. Now I've shown you a image, right, of these three things. But you don't need the image, because if you read Bava, these are the three significant factors which you will find in his stories. His stories all revolve around that, how the mountain or how the temple or how the soil. These are the stories that Bava basically talks about. So what is Bavaism? If you ask me that question, what is Bavaism? I mean, it is the ideology that is created by Bava. What has Bava created? What Bava has created, going back to what I started with, is the essence of the soil of Tiruvannamalai. He talks to you about the soil of Tiruvannamalai. His stories, they make you pick up that soil in your hands, rub the soil, find out its rugged nature, and then just smell the soil. It gives you the color of the soil. It gives you the texture of the soil. It gives you the smell of the soil. So that is why when it comes to Tondaimandalam, the region to which he belongs, he is called the son of the soil. He belongs to the soil. So that is what they would say about someone like Robert Burns also. Remember, I told you about Scotland. Why I was interested in Scotland. That's because I read Robert Burns. So when Robert Burns writes, he writes from his plow. You understand what a plow is, right? Something that is used to, cut open the soil. So he writes from the plow. In the morning, he would have been a plowman. And in the evening, after coming home, working on his fields, he would go lie down, eat something, lie down, and then he would pen his poetry. That's exactly what Bava does. I told you Bava worked in a electricity sector, right? But you know what? He was very poor. He earned enough money, and then he bought a huge land for himself. For what? Not to build houses. He bought a land to farm. He wanted to farm because he basically comes from a heritage of farmers. His family is a family of farmers. So he comes from that. So what he farms, that he brings down in his writing. So that is his genius. That is what makes him what he is. That is what creates his ideology of Bavaism. So he brings out the essence of his landscape. He brings out the essence of his country. All of us are facing the same problem, the problem of urbanization. We are seeing our farmlands being eroded. In India, we are facing that. It's a huge problem. What were farmlands are today sold off because the farmers are not getting enough money. Farming is no longer sustainable. They are not earning enough. The government probably is not doing enough for them. And we, urbanscapes, people who belong to the urban jungles, we do not do anything for them. So, you know what? Our farmlands are diminishing. It's a major thing. But what Bava does is that he makes us reclaim that. So there are a lot of, important agricultural revolutionaries who are doing revolution in the field of agriculture. But what makes Bava different is that he's a revolutionary who also writes. So what happens on the fields? He pens it down. He brings it to people like us who are, as I said, I belong to the urban jungles. I do not know what is happening in my, in my villages. So Baba has opened my eyes. He tells me what is happening in my villages. He says how much of, distress the farmers are facing. So what we are now undergoing because of people like Baba, hats off to him on that, is that we are reclaiming our landscapes. We are reclaiming our forests, our ancient agricultural practices, which have been lost. Indonesia has got a lot of indigenous agricultural practices. Are they still being followed? You guys need to research that. Are you also losing out all your indigenous practices, your indigenous culture? Because I think, there is a lot of Western influence in Indonesia also, as it happens in India. A lot of Western influences. We have lost a lot of our indigeneity. Are you losing that? If you're losing that, that's your niche. Write about that. Research about that. Write about that. Let the world know about that. Forget the world. Let your own people know about that. Let people in Jakarta know about that. Because they probably might not know what is happening in the villages. Write about that. Because as I said, that is Bavaism. That is what Bavaism. He has made us reclaim the landscapes. A big movement has started in India now. What is that movement? We have all these beautiful, big landscapes like Bangalore. You must have heard of, big cities like Bangalore or Mumbai or, Delhi. These are major cities. Chennai. South in Tamil Nadu, we have a major city called Chennai. Everything is being eroded. So, you know what? These youngsters who are working in the IT sector, who are working in the corporate sectors, in the weekends, what they do is they go to the villages. They get the feel of the land. That has become something great now. It's called, it's called tourism. But even that helps because we are going back to our lands. How did this happen? How did our, youngsters who live in the cities, who have never experienced village life, how are they going back to the villages? How, there are a lot of our business people, a lot of our IITians, very educated technocrats. They have left their jobs and they are going back to farming. How did it happen? It happened because of writers like Baba, who made things, possible for them. Friends, do that. Reclaim your past, reclaim your culture, bring it out. So many of our primeval forests are being lost. I told you about this mountain, right? This mountain has got some of the most primeval ancient forests. But these were getting slowly cut off. A lot of deforestation was happening. So one fine day, the administration, they said that we are going to cut off 100 trees. You know what they did? They went and stood there hugging those trees. They said, let's not cut our trees. It would have remained a movement which probably someone, like me, who is 300 kilometers away from Tonde Mandalam would not have come to know of it. But Baba, he went there, he protested, he came back, he wrote an essay about it, where he talks about, the cutting of primeval trees. He wrote an essay, he made us aware. He said, look what is happening. And, when we become aware, what we did, I don't know whether Dr. Lakshmi Priya mentioned this to you. When we read the story, I'm telling you this because we read the story and we translated it into English. Because what we thought is, okay, why should only Tamilians know this? The story was in Tamil. Why should only Tamilians know this? Let everyone know it. So we took it upon ourselves. We translated that story. And today we have made it, across the globe so that let everyone know about what is happening out there. So for us, what happened is when we read that story, Dr. Priya tells it very beautifully. She says that before that, reading that story, she had not even planted a single plant in her entire life because she comes from the city. You understand what she's trying to say? She has not planted a single plant, we have, house trees and house plants are all today. We have never done that. But you know what? After reading that story, we thought, why not do it in our own small way? So we started planting trees or plants. That is what is the power of a story. It can make you change not just your lives, it can make you change the world. Write stories of that sort. Please write stories of that sort. That is what we mean by Bavaism. Bring out your culture, bring out your landscape. So this is our contribution to Bavaism. 3 of his collections we have translated. One of them is called Landscapes, which is essentially about the soil. He talks to us about what is happening on the soil. What are the essential problems that agriculture is facing? What is changing? How is our landscape changing? It's a collection of, I guess, something 14 non-fictional stories. Now, when I use that word stories, I want you to understand it in a very contemporary term. It's not fiction. It's a story that is part of life. It's a story that you have to experience, you have experience, and that you make into a story for people to read, for people to understand, for people to get an essence of your culture. It's a resonance. You know, in new historicism, you have a concept that is called resonance. Somewhere, in some age, someone writes. And, you know, that person dies, but the book will live on forever. The story will live on forever. The story will transcend time. The story will transcend space. It will transcend everything, and it will come to you. That is called resonance. So if, I'm just saying, if, you know, this book is available, if any of you think that, okay, let me also read what exactly is the landscape of Tamil Nadu. And if you get that story, I think it's available online also. You take one part of that, you know, one fiction, one story, one essay. You take that, and when you read that, what is happening is that the story resonates from Tonde Mandalam and coming down to your place, Samaran. So that is called resonance. It moves across time and space and air and everything. That's the power of a story. That's what, you know, Baba has done. And in some way, we have helped Baba do that. So that's an essential part of our creative, license also. So landscapes is all about that. Dr. Priya has translated landscape. Our first translation was called Shared Meat and Late Nights. I'll tell you what exactly shared meat is, because it's a very beautiful concept which I did not know before this translation came out. It's a very unique concept of the culture of Tonde Mandalam. It comes from the villages of Tonde Mandalam. And I was fortunate enough to translate another of his collections, which is called The Chamber of Bashir. Bashir is a very important South Indian writer of short stories. So let me wind up with this few examples. So let's talk about the shared meat ideology. Now, all of us are Muslims. So we have, you know, one of our Eids, which we call in Tamil Nadu, we call it the Bakri, where, you know, we sacrifice lambs, goats, and then we divide the portions, and then one portion we keep for ourselves, and, you know, the rest of the portions we give to our families and neighbors, right? All of us do that. But in Tonde Mandalam, which is not Muslim, it's not Islamic, they have a concept that is called shared meat. When I started reading the story, I didn't know what was shared meat. So I was thinking, okay, how do they share the meat? Is it something Islamic, or is it something very similar to Islam? So I didn't know. But it's something very, very, very different from Islam. Okay, it's a very different culture. So there, it's a very poor country. It's absolutely poor, right? They're very poor. So poor that the people in those villages, you know, they would not be able to buy meat for themselves. Okay, they're very poor. They cannot afford to buy meat. So, but meat is an essential part of their staple. So how do they eat meat? So what happens is that if an animal dies, okay, let's imagine a buffalo or, you know, something, an animal dies. What they would do is that they would bring that element to the middle of the village. Okay, so every village in India, there would be a central meeting point. Usually it will be a big banyan tree. Okay, there will be a huge banyan tree. And surrounding that, all the villagers would sit. So when I use that term villagers, please don't think of it in thousands and thousands, a few hundreds, like, 100, 200 people. That would form a village. So they would all come to that. So that dead, what we would call a carcass, that would be brought to the central part of the uh, village. And you know what they would do? They would skin that animal and they would cut the animal. They would slaughter the animal and they would divide it into as many families, as there are in that village. So if there are 80 families, for example, the body or the carcass would be divided into 80 equal portions. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? It's a very communal kind of a eating practice for them. So it would be divided and it would be sent to every family in that village. And you know what is the essential thing? It has to be cooked immediately. They do not have refrigerators. There is no method for them to, salvage it, store it. So it has to be cooked immediately. So I'm just giving an idea. Imagine, someone finds that at 3 o'clock in the morning, early morning, when most of us would probably be soundly sleeping, it would be brought, it would be cut, and it would be given to these houses, distributed to these houses, and it would be immediately cooked. So even the children who would be sleeping, they would be woken up and, they would also partake of that meat. Now, I know when it comes to Islam, this is forbidden. Okay, I know that. But as I said, this is a different culture. This is their practice. So what Baba essentially does is that he brings that practice out into the open. He makes the people aware of what is called an indigenous practice, which might be taboo for so many other cultures, but doesn't matter. It's a part of their culture. So you are made to understand a particular culture. I'll tell you one thing. When I was in Indonesia, sometime back, 2019, if I'm right. So I was traveling from Semarang, Yogyakarta to some other place. We were traveling by train. So Dr. Rahayu had asked one of your students to assist me. So she was traveling along with me. So we were talking about the different, parts of Indonesia. And she was telling me about one particular part of Indonesia, which is a bit backward, where those, their practices are still very tribal. They are very, ancient or very primeval. So she was telling me, how they have still maintained their indigenous identity, their food style, their, their lifestyle, their cuisine, everything is so different, she was telling me. Because if I remember correctly, I was asking her about the Komodo dragon. So I was fascinated by the idea of the Komodo dragon. So I was asking her. So from there, it was a stream of consciousness. We were going to so many different things. And she was telling me about their cuisine and their cultural practices, which is very different from what I believe is followed, probably in your place, Java. Right? But that is what makes Indonesia so heterogeneous, right? You have so many different regions and so many different practices. The same applies here also in India also. We have so many different practices, so many different. So one of those, which have been erased by the influx of Western civilization, by the influx of the so-called modern and civilized civilization, Baba brings that. We, it seems, had so many different irrigation practices which were used in the fields, which are now lost. So what Baba did, remember I told you he purchased a farmland. He started farming there. He started using all those erased irrigational practices. One of them is called the Kavale. If you ask me what is Kavale, I do not know what is Kavale. It's been lost. Maybe even the modern farmers do not know Kavale, but he brought that out. He somehow, researched it and he brought that out. He's doing that in his farms. He's trying to do that in his farms. Now, that is what is called reclamation. That is the success story that I'm trying to. As I said, he's not just doing it, he's also writing it. So when it writes, it comes So the soil, the way the soil is irrigated, that becomes an essential part of his writing. So when he had that, no, it seems he built a well. Okay, so that well, Baba's well, is very famous. You guys need to come here and see his well. You know, it's a very, very beautiful well, steep, and the way the water, goes inside that well. The water seeps inside. The seeping, as the technology is very archaic, it's very ancient. It's being lost. But Baba has brought that. So this is the essential part of Bavaism. It's called Manvasana. This is how I started. Manvasana means the smell of the soil. Have you, when the first rain falls, imagine a very hot day, and when the rain falls, a peculiar smell comes from that, when the water hits the soil, a very beautiful smell comes. That in Tamil, it's called Manvasana. Man means soil, Vasana means smell, the smell of the soil. It's very unique, it's very beautiful. Of course, today in English, they have this term called petrichor. A lot of people are writing about petrichor, but petrichor, let me tell you, is something that has to be experienced in the villages, not in, the place where I live, where, it's all cement pavements. It's all, artificial pavements, where the rainwater does not hit the soil. So I was fortunate enough to go to Baba's land, go through that land, live in that land, experience that land. For me, it was scary because there are snakes, there are, huge spiders, there are all kinds of reptiles. I belong to a place where, my house is insulated from reptiles. Not even a single mosquito comes inside my house. That's the way I live. But going there, experiencing that sort of gave me an insight into my own identity. I want you people to translate that into your writing. Bring that out. It's such a beautiful thing because you not just write a story, you also share your experiences, you share your culture. So, friends, interact with your landscape. Look at your landscape. Indonesia is considered to have some of the most beautiful sunrises and sunsets in the world. I don't want this to be a statistical fact. How many of you have actually experienced that? I'm asking you. Do you do that? Do you see the sunrises? Do you see the sunsets? Do you spend, let's say, 2 minutes of your time halting, putting away your mobile phones? Don't even take a selfie. Put away your mobile phones. Don't see through the lens of your camera. See it through your eyes. Forget selfies. Don't think that the world has to, immediately be shared that selfie. No, experience that, imbibe that, and then write it down. That's creativity. Anyone can take a selfie, but only your eyes experience, your mind absorbs, and your hand translates that into writing. Bring that. So interact with your landscape, interact with your nature, look at the glory of your nature. And that write your tongue, write your geography, write about you, about, what you are. Create your own heterocosms. Maybe from that you can go for imagination, Look at your landscape, and from that landscape you probably can create something new. But it has to start only from this. So shine a light on your culture, shine a light on your practices. Because if you do that, what you're doing is that you're creating a textual monument which will remain forever. Thank you. You can always interact with me. Please do ask me questions and, offer your own opinions. I'm here. Thank you so much for your patient listening. I hope I was able to put across the ideas which I started this whole session with. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. The field is open for your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jinnah, for that enlightening session. Now
Thank
we
you.
will open the floor for questions.
Sure,
If any
please.
of you have questions for Dr. Jinnah, feel free to type them in the chat box or use the raise hand feature to ask directly. And please don't forget to introduce yourself before delivering your question. Yeah. Yeah, Mbak Meisha, you may.
Good morning. I'm
Good morning.
Meisha. Thank you, Mr. Abdul Jinnah, for sharing your experiences and insights today. As an Indonesian beginner in creative writing, I sometimes feel uncertain about my abilities, especially when comparing myself to others. You mentioned that the inspirations to begin writing emerged after your arrival in Indonesia. I
Yes.
often feel a sense of limitation when it comes to creativity, as though it may be too late to pursue creative writing, especially knowing that others may have begun at a young age or possess innate talent. How can we overcome this restrictive mindset and begin writing with confidence? Thank you, sir.
That's a very interesting question. See, some of the world's greatest writers, okay, have not begun at a young age. Probably they would have done something, they would have been preoccupied with their, ordinary lives, working some job, working some menial job. And then one fine day, it would have struck them that what am I doing with my life? What's happening? How have I become like this? And then they start writing. So see, writing is in our sensibilities. We all have stories to tell. Every single one of us have stories to tell. I remember there was this very beautiful poem that was written by an American poet called, if I'm right, it's Archibald MacLeish. Archibald MacLeish was a lawyer. So you'd go, in America, lawyers are very, very successful. They earn a lot of money. So he used to practice law, he used to earn a lot of money, but coming home, he would lie down and he would not get sleep because he would be thinking, what have I done with my life? What am I doing? What kind of a life is this? And then one fine day, one of his friends dies. His friend is a poet. I forgot the poet's name. So he dies. And then he says, okay, who's going to write after him? That was the time when he started thinking that, okay, why not I try it? See, fantastic question. But you know what is the inherent problem? The inherent problem is this thought that tells us that, okay, maybe I'm too late. Maybe I should have started young. Maybe I cannot do it. Nothing of that sort. Remember, I came to Indonesia in 2019 when I believe I was 45. Okay. I started writing at the age of 45. I'm not saying that I'm a great writer. I'm not. I'm an obscure writer. I'm anonymous. Doesn't matter. What matters is that I started writing at the age of 45. Any time can be a time to start. It doesn't matter. There's nothing that says, you should start at the age of 18 or there is a legal age to start writing. Nothing of that sort. Just write. Put down words on paper. It might be tough. It will be tough. But if you have that, start with the story. Create. It will come. The first story is not always the blockbuster. The first story might be obscure, but going on and on and on, you will develop it. You are young. It's never too late for you. When I can write at the age of 45, why can't you write at this age? Don't ever think that. Start writing. Contribute your might. Okay? All the very best for that. If you have that passion, start. Just start. Don't think about anything else. All the very best.
Okay,
Thank you
Mbak
so much
Meisha,
for your insights.
does it answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much for your insights, sir. Your answers have truly been eye-opening to me.
Yeah. And when you write, send it to me. I'll read it.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Dr. Jana, for the answer. Now we'll move to the next questioner, Mas Muhammad Zakwan. You can only ask one question since we ran out of time. Thank you. Mas Muhammad Zakwan.
We have two raised hands.
Yes. Mas Muhammad Zakwan.
May I? Sorry.
Oh. Okay, then let's change into Mbak Sri Minda.
Yeah, okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, Dr. Abdul Jina. Thank you very much for your very comprehensive.
Bu Sri, I'm sorry, but it's muted. We can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Abdul Jina, you have two introductory questions in your slide. The first one is, can there be literature without landscape? And then your answer is for that question is yes, by referring to some literary work in the romantic era, right? And then the second question, how is literature defined by landscape? Right. Since you are also talking about Frost, Robert Frost,
Yes.
the poet that my favorite, yeah. So what I understand from Frost is that he is using, landscape, nature as a, what do you call that? As a vehicle to explore the complexity of life. So it is just like, symbolize the complexity of life. When I listen to your presentation, it seems that you are not taking the topic to that kind of description. I mean, using nature to symbolize life complexity as Frost is. So my question is, do you see Frost as also this?
As also? I'm sorry, I lost you. Ma'am, I think she lost her connection.
So I think we have to move on and move to the next questioner, Mas Muhammad Zakwan. One question only, okay?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Jina, for your insight and knowledge.
Sorry.
I am
Yeah, very sorry. I'm cut off just now.
Okay.
May I continue my only? Yeah, one question. I was cut off because of the Wi-Fi, the internet. May I continue only just this question?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
So
Mas
do you
Muhammad, you
finish
have
up?
to wait.
Yes.
Let please go ahead. Please go ahead, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. So, do you see Frost as the way I see it? Not on, actually what he's doing is not describing the landscape, American landscape, but to use it as the, as the vehicle to talk about the complexity, life complexity. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Jina.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. That's a
Assalamualaikum
very
warahmatullahi
interesting question.
wabarakatuh. Good morning.
That's an absolutely true statement that you're making.
Yeah.
Of course, he's using nature as a metaphor. I think when it comes to Frost, they use this term, they call it a synecdoche. So for Frost, as you very rightly put, he is using nature as a vehicle, as an instrument to put forward, in your own words, the complexities of human life. Right, absolutely. But it doesn't remove the fact that nature is there. Okay, he's not giving you a description of nature. But I think I was also trying to move in those lines where I was telling you that even the title of my discussion over here, the well and the soil, they are not just descriptive practices, they are also metaphorical elements. So when Bava, for example, is using the well, it's not just about, the description of the well, using it as a metaphor of reclamation. So that's how nature, even Wordsworth for that matter. And when I was giving you about the stolen boat, one of the images which I put forward is not just about a description of nature. It's also about using nature as a metaphor for human growth. The way he approaches nature and how nature makes him grow, that's also a metaphor. So your point is absolutely true. But to extend the point that I was trying to make, yes, Frost may not give you experiences or descriptions of nature, but he does use nature. I mean, how did we know about apple picking if not for reading about, that poem, apple picking? Or how did we know about the west running brook, which is a brook, which is it's a nature. It's one of the elements of nature. So the concepts of New England, which cannot put forward, it's there. It's very unique. It's very American. That's the point that I was trying to. Thank you, ma'am. It was a very interesting question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Jina.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Can we move on with your question? There was one question in the air.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Jinnah, for your insight and knowledge on this topic. I want to put forward a question regarding nonfiction writing. It's about how does a writer incorporate aspects of creative writing into nonfiction, because of course you can't just suddenly come up with a poetry in the middle of a research paper, of course not. So how does a creative writer approach nonfiction writing? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Okay. From your question, what I'm trying to understand is that you're looking at nonfiction in two different avenues, right? One is academic writing. So academic writing has got nothing creative about it. It's more intellectual. The domain is very intellectual. We are talking about nonfiction as creativity, right? Am I right? So how do I bring in creativity into nonfiction is your question.
Yes.
Nonfiction can be made creative in so many different ways. One is the stylistic conventions that you're going to make. So what is the style that you're going to follow? Prose in itself is very dry. Let's be very honest about it. Let's be very, very pragmatic. Prose in itself is very dry. It does not cater, let's say, to aspects which poetry might usually cater to. It's very dry. It has to be matter of fact. It has to be, straight to the point. It has to be candid.
Yes.
That's one thing that, makes prose very different from the other genres. But you can be a great prose writer by the way you use your stylistic conventions. Let me give you an example of one of our writers. Her name is Arundhati Roy. She became famous as a novelist. She has written 2 novels only. But most of the time she writes nonfiction. Okay, she writes a lot of essays. She writes essays about the, let's say, the contemporary issues that India is facing, the problems that India as a democracy faces. She writes about that. So she's very controversial. But what sets her apart from any other writer is the way she uses the language. She writes prose, but she writes it in a very creative manner, as in she writes or she uses vocabulary which is very, very beautiful. It reads like a lyric. It reads like a lyric. So though she writes prose, she uses the conventions of poetic devices in her writing. That's one way where you can, change your, or rather, make your prose very creative. Okay. Let's imagine there is a statement. You go, you see something on the beach. Okay, you go to the beach. You see that the sun is setting. Now you can write it in two different ways. One, what you can do is you can say, okay, I went to the beach today. I saw that the sun was setting. Now that's a statement. Now the statement in itself is not creative. What you're seeing, you're writing it matter of fact. It's not creative. But the way you word it, for example, you talk about the various shades that you see on the sky, the hues that you see on the sky when the sun sets. Instead of simply saying that the sun set, if you say that the sun set in a flood of azure or in the flood of crimson, because I think when the sun is setting, the background, the sky in the background would have a kind of a blood red color. So when you're able to put that, what happens is your statement of the fact becomes creative statement of the fact. That is what changes prose writing from being very dull, from being very uninspiring to something that is purely literary. Try it that way. Go to Instagram, go to LinkedIn, read some of the most popular posts of that day. Mostly they would tell you only about ordinary, common, trivial, everyday facts. But they will put it in a language that is literary. They will put it in a style that is literary. That is what is creativity. It's not stating the fact. It's not stating the obvious fact. It's how you state the obvious fact. That is what makes it creative. Try it out. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Mas Muhammad Zafar,
Thank you very
does it
much,
answer
Dr.
your question?
Abdul.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jinnah, for the answer. And I think it seems like it is time to conclude the session. Thank you very much for the inspiring talk.
Thank you. It was wonderful interacting with you people. Thanks a lot.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to give Dr. Jinnah a big applause.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
As we reach the end of today's workshop, I'd like to extend my deepest gratitude to Dr. Abdul Muhammad Ali Jannah for sharing his knowledge and insight with us today. A big thank you as well to Dr. Rahayu Puji Haryanti M. for her opening remarks. Well, now let's have a photo session that will be led by the operator. So everyone, please turning on your cameras. There's 11 slides. Let's start from slide number 1. 1, 2, 3. Slide number 2. 1, 2, 3. Slide number 3. 1, 2, 3. Slide number 4. 1, 2, 3. Slide number 5. 1, 2, 3. Slide number 6. 1, 2, 3. Slide number 7. 1, 2, 3. Slide number 8. 1, 2, 3. Number 9. 1, 2, 3. Number 10. 1, 2, 3. And the last slide. 1, 2, 3. Don't forget to fill the Google form to approve of your attendance that has been shared by our committee. In the chat box. The link is in the chat box, yeah. I hope today's session has been both inspiring and enlightening for all of us. Please keep an eye on your inbox for feedback forms and additional resources from today's workshop. We look forward to seeing you at future events. Once again, thank you all for attending. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a wonderful day ahead.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Abdul
you.
Jina. Yeah,
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Meet again
Thank you.
sometime.
Sure,
Okay.
bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Ya, terima kasih semua, Mas Evan. Ya, thank you. Thank you. Thank you all, Haris, etc.